right. Yes, the developmentalist. All right, everyone. Welcome. Welcome. Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Negin Gavami, and I'm an associate professor here in the Department of Psychological Science. And I want to welcome all of you to the 6th annual Dr. Ronald Keith Barrett Lecture. Yay! And our esteemed speaker today is Dr. Rob Sellers, and Dr. Deanna Cook is going to introduce him in just a second. But before we get started, I would like to invite our department chair, Dr. Vandana Tadani, to come here and tell us a little bit about the lecture, our department. So please welcome her.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, glasses. Oh.
First, thanks to all of you for being here. I want to begin by thanking our Psychological Science Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee for organizing this wonderful lecture. In addition to putting on the Ron Barrett Lecture for us annually, this committee's work and honestly, its very existence at this time in history in this country reminds us that we as an academic department in an institution of higher learning have to strive to protect and champion values of equity, representation, and belonging. So thank you so much for those contributions. I want to also acknowledge Emily Olson, who's in the back, for her work in arranging all of the logistics that went around this day. Thank you, Emily. So today we honor the legacy of Dr. Ronald Keith Barrett. Dr. Barrett passed away in 2015. He was at LMU for 36 years. Dr. Barrett joined LMU in 1978 after completing his Ph.D. at the University of Pittsburgh. He went on to become LMU's first Black full professor in 1996. That was not that long ago, right? Dr. Barrett was trained as a social psychologist, but later came to be known for his scholarship on cross-cultural differences in death, dying, and bereavement, with special emphasis on funeral rituals in the Black community. He was a member of the Association of Death Education and Counseling and a founder of that organization's Multiculturalism Committee and People of Color Forum. As a teacher, he created classes on death and dying and on the psychology of men. He was generous in his contributions to LMU and larger communities. He served as the interim chair of the Department of African American Studies at one point, and then later he was chair of the psychology department. I was a younger faculty member then, and I experienced firsthand how staunchly he supported his faculty. Dr. Barrett created the Brothers of Consciousness organization here on campus as a way to support and uplift Black male students. He was the founder of the United Methodist Junior Basketball League and Youth Employment Project, aimed at preventing gang involvement and violence amongst young people. I was at Dr. Barrett's funeral when he passed. The impact that he made was so clear there. So many people from so many different parts of his life were present and spoke to his contributions to themselves personally and to their communities. On Dr. Barrett's passing, Dr. David Hardy, who was our chair at the time, raised the idea of hosting an annual lecture in Dr. Barrett's memory. To honor who Dr. Barrett was and what he stood for, this annual lecture focuses on some aspect of diversity, ethnicity, race, culture, and the intersection of these with psychological science. We are thrilled to have Dr. Robert Sellers here today as this year's speaker. Dr. Deanna Cook, as Dr. Gavami mentioned, is going to introduce Dr. Sellers. Dr. Deanna Cook was Dr. Sellers' mentee and student, which is just incredibly special. I'm going to simply express my gratitude to you for being here. I'm so excited to hear your remarks. Thank you, everybody.
Good afternoon, everyone. All right. The folks who know me know that I come from a Baptist church, and so call and response is great. It's really my pleasure to introduce, as Dr. Tadani said, my mentor and my friend for over 30 years now, Dr. Robert M. Sellers. And it's so fitting that he is here for the Ronald Barrett lecture, because when we talk about what Dr. Barrett did for LMU, I will say Dr. Sellers has done for the University of Michigan in many ways of setting up structures and making sure that students of color had access and opportunities. to be in unity with one another. So when I think about him, I think about what I learned from his wisdom, his kindness, his grace under fire, because there's oftentimes a lot going on when we're in the midst of this work, and him doing it all with humor and community and love. So it's personally really rewarding to have him here with us. But Dr. Robert M. Sellers is the James Jackson Distinguished University Professor of Psychology and Education at the University of Michigan. Dr. Jackson was also an institution at the University of Michigan, so it's still fitting. He's a native of Cincinnati, which he will always let you know. He received his Bachelor's of Science degree at Howard University in psychology and his Ph.D. at the University of Michigan in personality psychology. He started his academic career as an assistant professor at the University of Virginia in 1990, and that's actually where we met. I started with him at University of Virginia. He returned to the University of Michigan in 97, where he has been on faculty ever since. He has had a productive and successful academic career as a scholar, studying the role of race in the psychological lives of African Americans. He and his many students and students at this point, we were talking about this at lunch, have made a significant impact in understanding the conceptual frameworks and the lives of African Americans and racial identity and racial socialization processes. In addition, Dr. Sellers has served in various academic leadership roles. He has been chair of the Department of Psychology. He has been the vice provost for equity and inclusion and chief diversity officer at the University of Michigan. He's been elected to the National Academy of Sciences and received numerous national and international honors, career awards, recognition for his scholarship, mentoring, service in the field. And he is currently serving as the founder and director of the Michigan Program for Advancing Cultural Transformation in the Health Sciences, IMPACT. I will say finally that the impact that he has had on students can probably be summed up in the fact that without his knowledge 2 years ago, 16 of his academic descendants wrote an article about his mentorship, his scholarship, and his role in the field of psychology. And we thought that that was the best fitting way to really share sort of who he has been to us and who he has been to the field. So thank you for being here. We appreciate you accepting the offer and look forward to hearing you.
Can you all hear me? All right. Big body, not necessarily a big voice. First and foremost, it is my great pleasure and honor to be here today. While I didn't know Dr. Barrett very well, I met him a couple of times at a couple of different conferences. I was aware of his work. And so I'm deeply honored to be here speaking at this event, honoring his life, his legacy, and the impact that he had. I'm also deeply honored given some of the people who have stood in my place before. Several great friends. I see one there in the back. Dr. Cheryl Grills was your speaker last year. Also Sandra Graham and Donna Nagata, past speakers in this particular series. I don't know that I'm worthy, but I am definitely honored to be here. And then finally, before I get started, I want to also thank the wonderful team that brought me here, that made sure that every moment, both coming and being here, has been special to me, and I appreciate each and every one of you. I see there's a couple others there. So with that, let's get started. So my talk today is on the argument for why psychology should care about racial and ethnic diversity. I hope in this talk to really address 3 points, and the talk is in 4 sections. The first part of the talk, I'll be focusing on why diversifying the field is especially important for the field of psychology, and in that, providing some context in terms of where we currently are. The second part of my talk will briefly touch upon the ways in which issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion are under attack, and therefore influence our struggle to make psychology more diverse, equitable, and inclusive. And then the third part of the talk attempts to provide you with something to take away, particularly how individual psychology departments actually are able to do their part. In reality, these are 3 different talks that I have given at different points in time that I've tried to condense to 3 different audiences. So I will do everything possible to stay under time, but I'm not going to promise that I will stay under time. And then what I'm really looking forward to is a conversation at the end, an opportunity for questions and discussions. All right. I want to first start off by setting the context with regards to race and ethnicity in psychology. So in 2019, you look at the racial composition of the US, hasn't changed too much, but you see 60% of the United States, according to census, was white. Roughly 18% was Latino, Latina, Latinx, a little more than 12 Black, and so forth. So you see a large proportion of the majority of individuals in the United States being white, but a growing majority of non-whites in the US. Now, when you look at that in comparison to where we are as a field, so in 2018, if you look at the number of Ph.D. recipients by race in the United States, you see that 71% of the PhDs actually were earned by white graduate students, and less than 29% earned by other BIPOC people of color. And what I should tell you about what's happening demographically is that number is actually dropping, that psychology is becoming more and more diverse, but it is still predominantly white, disproportionately white in the United States in terms of its breakdown. If you look at the percentage of people of color who are in tenure track faculty positions in psychology, and you look at it by rank, starting with the entry level assistant professors and new assistant professors, what you see is roughly 25% of the faculty, new incoming tenure track faculty are people of color, which means roughly 75% are still white. And as you move up the track, so these are assistant to associate to full professor, you see that the good news is the number of full professors, the number of students of color or people of color becoming tenure track faculty increase as we are today. We're becoming more diverse. The bad news is if you look at full professors, which are the highest rank in the faculty, you have less than 11% of full professors being faculty of color. And that includes several historically minority organizations or universities in this group. So disproportionately white, overrepresented with regards to white, trend towards diversifying, increasing faculty of color, but still overrepresented. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and start off with the rationale for why diversity, equity, and inclusion is important, I would argue, not only in higher education, but in psychology in particular. So when we talk about the case for diversity, equity, and inclusion, as it relates to higher education, there are typically four ways that scholars and policymakers tend to argue for diversity, equity, and inclusion. The first is one where folks argue simply that diversity, equity, and inclusion is important. It's important in higher education simply because having a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive community is the morally right thing to do. It's just the morally right thing to do. Having everybody have opportunities and access feels right morally. The second argument is one that you probably heard more, is it's the socially just thing to do. Whereas the moral argument argues that it's the morally right thing to do, usually out of some value system tied to whether it's religion or one's own personal lived values. The socially just thing to do recognizes, first and foremost, that while talent may be distributed widely and broadly, opportunity is not. It recognizes the fact that there is injustice in the world, that there are structural barriers. Everybody doesn't have the same opportunity. It's the anti-meritocracy argument. The third is one that came out of the turn of the century, early 20th century, this notion that the world is becoming more diverse, is becoming smaller, and that in order for America in particular to compete, it is important that America becomes more diverse, that our students get used to experiencing a more diverse environment. That if America is going to be competitive in the world, it is going to require our students to be in more diverse spaces and places. Now, as it relates to these three arguments, I'm actually down for all three of them. I believe that it is the morally right thing to do. It feels right in terms of my personal values. I definitely understand the social structures and the social inequities that exist within the world. And it is true that if we do not become more diverse, that we will be at a competitive disadvantage. Those are all three reasons that I agree with and feel personally makes sense, and for which there is also evidence. But it's this last reason, which is the reason that I have utilized in my own work with respect to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that is the reason that diversity is fundamentally the key to academic excellence. It's the key to academic excellence. So, why would I say that? Now, I would argue that higher education can basically be broken down, just about every area of higher education could be broken down into one thing. Basically, whether it's a social science, a science, most of our professions ultimately prioritize innovation and innovation around problem solving. And the reality is that diversity is fundamental with regards to problem solving. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. Now, someone may say, well, but what about the humanities and the arts? I would argue that basically the humanities and the arts also fundamentally need diverse perspectives and experiences in order for it to thrive. All right. So what do we know? What does the data tell us? Very quickly. The data on problem solving leads to the same thing, that more diverse groups lead to more solutions, more creative solutions, and ultimately more successful solutions. This is data in psychology, this is data in business, this is data in complex systems, that more diverse groups lead to more solutions, more creative solutions, and more successful solutions. And you know it in your own experience. So like right now, if I said, you know what, I got $15,000, I'm going to break you up into groups of 7. And you get to choose who the other 6 people are going to be. And I want you to solve this particular problem. Now, you have the choice of being at a group that is exactly like you. It's had same experiences, same knowledge, knows the same things that you do, because we've had the same experiences, doesn't know the same things that you do, etc. Or you can be in a group where they're very different, with very different strengths, very different weaknesses, different expertise, etc. So how many of you want to be in the group where everybody is like you? Now, if it was a party, that's the group you want to be in. Psychology tells you that that's the group that you want to be in. But if you want to solve problems, you want diversity of experience, etc. Unfortunately, though, while diversity is necessary with regards to innovation, it is not sufficient to actually achieve an advantage in academic excellence. You also have to have an equitable and inclusive environment in order to reap the benefits of diversity. Let's go back to the example of, got this money out here, you got an opportunity, you got this diverse group Your team is ready. Got everything covered, you're ready to go. 7 people, mighty 7. But what happens when 3 of your 7 folks are not allowed to talk? It's part of the rule, not allowed to talk. And 2 more who could talk and who are allowed to talk, but just a few minutes ago before coming in the room had their humanity challenged, their legitimacy challenged, and so therefore are reeling from that experience. You don't benefit from their expertise and what you would have gotten with this diverse group. So you have to have not only diversity, but also equity and inclusion. So what do I mean by equity and inclusion? People often get confused and assume equity is the same as equal. When I'm talking about equity, I'm talking about providing everyone with what they each individually need to be successful, and also a willingness to actively challenge bias, harassment, and discrimination. So you're trying to provide everybody with what they need, not necessarily the same thing. For instance, this is a demonstration that I very much love in terms of defining the difference between equality and equity. Everyone doesn't get the same thing, but everyone gets what they need. That's the goal of providing equity. When I talk about inclusion, I mean ensuring that everyone has an opportunity to contribute to the common good and thus a sense of belonging and purpose. So it doesn't make sense to have a diverse group and even to be equitable in how you treat them if you're also not providing them with inclusion. Now, I will tell you that inclusion is the hardest thing to change because fundamentally it means changing existing power structures. It means listening to people that you otherwise wouldn't have. Now, I've laid out what I mean by diversity, equity, inclusion, why in general these are important with regards to higher education. But I want to talk about it specifically in the context of the field of psychology. So how many folks here are psychology majors or psychologists? Oh, yes, I like that. Okay. So you can answer this question. What is the objective of psychology as a science? Anybody want to give it a shot? Okay, yes. Oh, see, don't scratch your head. Oh, I like that answer. Anyone disagree or have a different thing that they want to add? I think that's a perfect answer. This is how we got the systematic investigation and understanding, but I would argue it's the understanding of the antecedents, the nature and consequences of human behavior. True? That fits 100% with your answer. you just got an A for the day. So I don't know who your professor is that you're here. Please, Dr. Banks, give him an A for the day. See, this is a participatory event. So would anyone disagree with this particular definition? Okay. So it's a systematic investigation and understanding of the antecedents, nature, and consequences of human behavior. Well, unfortunately, we as psychologists have not actually done that, or at least as a field. We have had a tendency to be very narrow in our focus of how we define human. So if psychology is actually going to live up to its potential as a field, it's going to have to diversify who is being studied. So when we think about the way that psychology typically is examined, we tend to look at a very, very narrow slice of people and assume that their behavior and the observations of their behavior is the totality of humanity. That not only has problems when it's applied to communities outside of that very, very narrow slice, but it also impoverishes psychology as a field. It diminishes psychology as a field. Does great damage to other folks, but even for psychology, it is damaging and limiting as a field. So Henrik and his colleagues came up with this term called weird, and psychology as a weird science, when they noted that 95% of psychological samples at the time of their study consist of individuals from Western, educated, industrialized, rich, democratic countries. Now, you would believe that that's the majority of countries, but it is a small, small sliver of the human population. So fundamentally, we're missing it if we're talking about our goal is to systematically examine human observation. Also, Arnett noted that not only are we looking at a very narrow sliver of countries, but we're looking at a very narrow sliver of populations within the countries, with almost 70% in his study of the US focusing on college students. How many of you all think that college students are representative of the entire population? No one thinks you don't think you're, I wouldn't either. You've got issues with regards to age, class, culture, just to name a few. The majority of people in the United States don't go to college. And what you're like now is very different from what you're likely to be like later in life and what you were like before you got in life. But yet much of our psychology, unfortunately, is built on that. And so we must diversify who is being studied. Oops. We also have to diversify what topics are being studied. So what is worthy of study and what is not worthy of study? Unfortunately, we've been limited in psychology with regards to that. So one of our former students, Michigan, who's now a professor at Stanford, Stephen Roberts, did a important study where he looked at the three top journals in cognitive psychology, the three top journals in developmental psychology, and the three top journals in social psychology, and went back and looked at it from 1974 to 2018, over 40 years across 4 decades. And he looked at each of these separately and wanted to see to what extent was race published in these particular journals. And what he found was basically over time, you see a slight increase with regards to developmental psychology, but basically you're talking about roughly 11%. Social psych, you see a similar increase, but then dropping in the 2010s. And in cognitive psych, no papers, no papers were published in the three top journals in with regards to race. Now, how many of you would argue that race as a concept in the lived experience, particularly in American society, across the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, and 2010s, were not important constructs in what was going on in this particular country? And if psychology says it is, by definition, examining human behavior, it's difficult to understand how that could be the case. And the top fields in those journals, or I'm sorry, the top journals in those fields did not see them to be particularly worthy of being studied. Part of that is if you also look at who were the editors with regards to those journals across those particular points in time. So 100% of the editors across those 4 decades in cognitive were white. The developmental journals, roughly 90%, and 95%, roughly 95% in social. So the editors are the ones that ultimately make the final decision in terms of what gets published and what doesn't. So our psychology is limited, again, as a function of what we're studying. We also find that there's a racial gap with regards to funding, that there's a consistent, persistent gap between the rate of funding for African Americans and Latino scholars compared to white and Asian scholars, and that a large portion of that gap has to do or is explained by the fact that the African American PIs and the Latino PIs were more likely to focus their research on issues such as community and focusing on population level issues, as opposed to more mechanistic and fundamental and theoretical foci for our white PIs. Doesn't mean that that's not important. Doesn't mean that we don't need theory, we don't need foundational, fundamental scholarship. But it does mean by being less diverse, we are missing in our study of human behavior something extremely important. Last but not least, I would argue psych need to do a better job in diversifying who is actually doing the study? So according to APA, the American Psychological Association, approximately 83% of all faculty within the United States psychology departments self-report as white. Now, this is problematic, but it gets even worse when we start looking at what are rated as quote unquote the top institutions and the places that are disproportionately publishing the scholarship within the field that's defining the field that you are reading in your classes, such that less than 7% of the Black, Latinx, and Native American graduate students are in those top 20 psychology departments. They have less than 7% enrollment with regards to their median enrollment with Black, Latinx, and Native American graduate students. So not only is the context that they're underrepresented in general, but it's particularly bad at the top graduate students. And I'll talk, graduate schools. I'll talk to you about that a little later. So then you may say, okay, yeah, so you've made this case about diversity, and why does, in particular, race, why does this matter? Why is this important? I'm not really down with this race stuff. You know, people are people. We want good people. We want good ideas. So I'm for diversity of ideas. So this is something that you're now hearing. We want diversity of perspectives. We don't want to be dealing with this social identity stuff. We want to deal with diversity of perspectives. That's what we're for, but we don't really, you know, that diversity of social identities, that's discrimination. Well, why does researchers' social identities matter? Well, psychology actually answers that question for you. There's lots and lots of data that support the following. So, how many of you would agree with me that individuals' social identities influence their life experience? Lots of data that show it. As a large Black cisgender 62-year-old man, my life would be very different if you change any one of those three. All right. We also know from reams and reams of data that individuals' life experiences influences their schemas, their frameworks, their worldview. So how I think the world actually works is influenced by the experiences that I've had in the world. Anyone disagree with that? And psychology, again, we have reams and reams of data showing that schemas are generalized view of how the world works influence how we perceive specific situations, specific events. Still with me? And those specific situations, those specific events, the questions that you ask is exactly the thing that leads to new ideas. For those of you who are planning, how many of you are planning to go to graduate school? Give you a secret. The secret to graduate school is smart people aren't people with all the answers. The smart people are the people with all the questions. You get judged on what questions you ask. So, what kinds of questions you ask lead to new ideas and new innovation. So next time someone says, I am for diversity of perspective, but I'm not for diversity as it relates to race, gender, sexual status, etc., class, then ask them, how are you going to get to diversity of perspective without addressing those issues? All right. So all of this means that social identity, this means is that an individual's social identity impacts all aspects of the research process. It impacts interpretation of the existing research literature, the extent to which you glean new questions and conceptualize your study. It impacts your research questions posed, the methods that you choose to employ, how you choose to employ them, what analysis strategy you choose to engage, as well as how you interpret the findings that you actually have. And finally, it influences the development of new theory. So I would make the case and make the argument that if psychology is to move forward as a field, it has to diversify in the three ways that I had just mentioned. So what is the most compelling? I gave you the answer. What is the most compelling rationale for diversifying psychology? Making science better. Yes, there is the social justice argument. Yes, there's the moral argument. Yes, there is the fact the world is changing, and those are all important arguments. But they may not be the most important argument if you're talking to folks who are deeply committed to the status quo. And if their commitment in the status quo argues that diversity, equity, and inclusion somehow is threatening to science, to the integrity of science, they're absolutely wrong. Because without becoming more diverse, more equitable and inclusive, we got a problem. So now I'm going to talk very quickly about the current ongoing attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion, not only in higher education, but also in this country. Now, I told you that these are three different talks. So this talk was one that I prepared really in May of 2023. And this was a talk that I gave to a group of chief diversity officers with the goal of giving them some sense of what was happening sort of underground and where we're going. Unfortunately, I was a bit too prophetic. So back then, you heard the rumblings of it, but it wasn't really clear. But one of the things that it's important to understand is the attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion is not a set of naturally occurring arguments, and that the arguments have gone back and forth and you see a change in terms of perspective based on the various arguments. Instead, this attack was organized. In fact, you see it before the attack on DEI, you saw the exact same attack, which they were practicing on with regards to God, Bell, faces in the bottom of the well, undergraduate or the elementary school theory, critical race theory. Sorry. This, I told you it was audience participation. This is what happens when you get a, you saw the exact same attack playing out first with critical race theory. So it's organized, extremely well funded, political, and its focus wasn't on gaining the support of conservatives. It was actually targeting moderates and moderate, quote unquote, liberals. It is fundamentally anti-evidence based. And worse, been unbelievably effective. Unprecedentedly effective from my perspective. Here are some examples of how it has played out in terms of higher education. So it's played out in terms of legislative attacks on DEI, the dismantling and restructuring of DEI offices, the weaponization of the Israel-Hamas conflict, coordinated attacks to oust college and university leadership who support DEI, so getting rid of presidents, et cetera, who would support it. It again results in the dismissal of 30 plus years of evidence supporting the benefits of DEI as a compelling interest in higher education. And it is a multi-pronged, coordinated media strategy. So you see it popping up, or you saw it popping up all across the media ecosphere. And not, again, not just the conservative media ecosphere. These attacks intentionally misrepresent what DEI is. They do so by never explicitly defining what they mean by DEI. Note, we started this talk defining our key terms. As a result, it provides an opportunity to legitimize one's own particular bias. If you're okay with dealing with issues of racial justice, but not really comfortable with LGBTQ plus issues, okay, come on aboard. Or you're not really clear, your particular issue of the day is some form of xenophobia. You know, I'm uncomfortable with all of these people who are from different places from me. Okay, come on aboard. I don't really feel like men should be playing women's sports or girls, whatever your particular bias, hang up, racism is, or problem is, come on aboard. The anti-DEI movement is right there for you. It provides what I call a discrimination Rorschach. Projective test of whatever your particular bias is. It tends to take one outlier incident and use it to define all DEI efforts. This particular place, which went way crazy in the way in which they do it, see, that's what DEI is. It intimates that DEI is an effort to indoctrinate students into an extreme leftist woke ideology. Like somehow these enemy, alien, crazy people have this plan of indoctrinating you into this particular cult of wokeism, which again, they never define what they mean by woke, but everyone is supposed to know what they mean by woke, which again means whatever you want it to mean that you don't particularly like as woke. And that's what DEI is all about. These are the ways in which DEI has been attacked. Some of these examples of misrepresentation is that DEI is only for certain people. And it only focuses on Black and Latinos or whatever group you have a problem with, that's what DEI focuses on. Now, interestingly enough, given that there's so many groups that different people have a problem with, they don't recognize that, well, no, actually DEI is trying to address everybody. They just see whichever group they don't particularly like, that's how they define DEI. They say, see, DEI is not good because it pits one group against another. Again, I spent 10 years as a chief diversity officer. I had never seen a DEI program that attempted to pit one group against each other. In fact, that is the death knell for any DEI effort. That schools are overrun with DEI bureaucracies, that there are thousands of DEI agents running around making a mess and addressing all of these folks. The argument that DEI is somehow antithetical to free speech, that DEI doesn't allow you to say what it is that you want to say. Now, mind you, I'm now at an institution that nobody is allowed to really say diversity, equity, and inclusion. Institution that took down those words on all the websites that it could find that were tied to the university. At no point did our work with regards to DEI ever tell anybody what they can and can't say. We may educate you in terms of how this is problematic, how this may impact someone, but we never ever said you can't say this or you're not allowed to say that. But yet, that's the way it plays. That DEI somehow excludes certain people, and in our particular institution, it excluded Jewish people, despite the fact that we had data that showed that of all of our students on our campus, based on their particular religious belief, our Jewish students were the ones who were most involved with regards to DEI, who were most favorable to our DEI efforts. So again, misrepresentation isn't tied to data, but it's thrown out there as if it is. And then this is the one that picks up from the anti-affirmative action and the foundational forms of racism, sexism in our country, that somehow DEI hires less qualified minorities, despite the fact that just about all the evidence shows that, and particularly in our DEI-related efforts, is that the traditionally underrepresented folks perform better, worked better, under more stress, etc. All right. So I'm coming to a place where, so we see what's happening with regards to DEI in our societies, what's happening with DEI, higher education, and this is a place where I could end, and we would end with a down note. But I'm not allowed to do that. So I'm going to try to leave you with something. And I'm going to actually spend a little bit more time talking to the faculty and administrators within this department, but you as students can also play a role in terms of how individuals' psychology departments can do their part to make psychology more diverse, equitable, and inclusive at the local level. So there are three ways that you can make a difference. First and foremost is what I call the people way. You have to recruit a more diverse faculty, staff, and student body. So if you don't do that, then you're just playing at it. Unfortunately, particularly as it relates to our faculty, our definitions, our problems are that our definitions of qualified are often exclusionary and reinforced a closed system that recapitulates itself. In other words, the criteria that we use in and of itself doesn't need any individual's attitudes or beliefs to still end up with the same set of outcomes. So our narrow definitions of what constitutes qualify is often determined in terms of, for our faculty's perspective, what is worthy of being studied. We often make decisions with regards to what is worthy of being studied. And certain things get prioritized and other things get minimized in terms of what areas are deemed as important. Was worthy of being studied, as we just pointed out, has a role. How should it be studied? Plays a role. And then ultimately, what is the worthy end product? So is it a paper? Is it a grant proposal? Is it doing work in the community? You've already shown data that suggests that there are racial differences with regards to what people are focusing on. Do we value a journal, CV, journals where the individuals have made conceptual and theoretical impacts, or than an individual who may have started with communities a particular longstanding program? There's not, those play a part in terms of who we ultimately end up selecting. Now, one of the reasons why this happens is because when we are looking for faculty, and for that matter, graduate students and usually staff, we have what I refer to as the post and pray method. So we start off with this notion that we value diversity. We really want it, so we'll just post that that's on the bottom line. We're interested, interested. But we post it in the same places. Not particularly. Look at the same places that aren't particularly diverse. And you know what? If you post it, we believe that they will come. They still don't come. You know why? Because we're fishing in bucket. No matter what great intentions one has, great bait one has, if one dips their hook in a bucket, they're not going to catch it. You have to be intentional with regard to your recruitment efforts. You have to go where people are, make it clear that this is a place that matters. I know we're running late, but I'm going to do this anyway. Quick example, close to home. The Department of Psychology at the University of Michigan, my beloved University of Michigan, I would argue historically one of the most diverse, equitable departments in the country. But yet, we too suffer. Rank is, it's highly regarded, ranked as the third highest department of psychology according to US News. If we dispute that, we believe we're number one. But yet that's how it goes. But despite that, we have, I did the study back 5 or 6 years ago. We had 87 tenure track faculty at that time, with 76 of them having earned their PhD from US schools. And of those 76 faculty with PhDs from US schools, 49% of them came from only 8 schools. And all but one of those 8 are in the top 10 psychology. And at first glance, you might say, oh, that's great. That's why you're so good. Of course, you're wonderful. As opposed to the problem. We're not different from any of the others in those top schools. So if we're all recruiting from the same thing, the same gene pool, that's problematic. Nature abhors homogeneity. We're all learning from each other. We are intellectually incest survivors. So those same ideas, we're just bouncing back around. We're not creating a space that brings in more ideas. But yet, ask anybody, they'll say, oh, University of Michigan, great place. So imagine what's happening in other spaces. So remember, even though we are recruiting over half of our faculty within the top 10 schools, note that those top 10 schools aren't diverse. Less than 7% in terms of people of color. So you have a systematic problem that has to be disrupted. Second, you have to create a more equitable and inclusive culture, because if you're trying to recruit folks, if your culture is bad, you're not going to recruit more diverse folks. And if you don't recruit more diverse folks, it's hard to change your culture. So you have to disrupt the status quo. Make sure that you interrogate all of your structures, your policies, your processes and practices for any bias. Here's some examples. To what extent are you focused in your discussions on hiring, promotion, et cetera, on things like institutional prestige, sort of the letterhead factor? Are there unexamined objective metrics? Or are you focusing on things like citation index or H factors to determine whether or not folks are good? So in psychology, and I would say in higher education in general, we're moving towards counting and we stop reading. But we're not actually reading the quality of the work that people are producing. We're just counting how many H factors and what their citation rate, or whether or not they've been funded. Also, what types of research is missing, who's not being missing, and then define what other forms of social bias may be coming into play. There are informal cues such as pictures on the wall, your newsletters, your recruitment material, which tell people that some people belong here and other people don't. Interrogate that material. Make sure that you empower voices that have traditionally been silenced. So again, faculty, I'm talking to you in terms of your faculty meetings, your committee assignments, your teaching assignments, who you nominate for awards and who doesn't get a nomination. And now the third and final thing that I'm going to talk about is creating a more inclusive curriculum. So you have to evaluate and regularly evaluate your curriculum for inclusion. Who are you citing who is getting left out? In particularly your intro level courses. Leverage existing resources such as your teaching centers, if you have teaching centers, your professional societies, APA, for example, to help provide the expertise and materials necessary to make that change. And then make sure that you institutionalize the concept of inclusive teaching, both in terms of your curriculum and pedagogy, by providing faculty with the support, whether it's course releases, teaching assistantship, necessary for them to get up to speed, and start with your foundational courses that are taught by multiple faculty. All right. As we get near the end, almost to the end, there's one thing I want you to remember as you engage in cultural change as it relates to your department or any organization. Understand first and foremost, it is hard. Anybody tell you it's easy, they're lying to you. And if you believe them, then that's your fault. It's supposed to be hard. If it was easy, it would have been changed a long time ago. It takes time. Not going to happen overnight. It didn't get this way overnight. So it's going to take time, but be committed to that time through persistence. Also understand nothing ever worthwhile is accomplished from a unanimous position, particularly change. There's always going to be resistance to change. And so if you're looking for unanimity, you're not going to find it. And most importantly, you're not going to change anything. But don't be afraid to go with some of the people and let some of the other people catch up. But despite all of that, I can promise you that it is more than worth it. So in closing out, I just want to reinforce this, that if psychology does not become more diverse, equitable, and inclusive, it risks becoming less valid, less relevant, and obsolete as a science and as a field focused on healing. So with that, I want to thank you for listening to me. In honor of Dr. Barrett. And if you have time for some questions, I would love that, but I also recognize some folks have to leave, so please do not hesitate. Oh, yes, absolutely.
All right. If you're leaving, please do so quietly because we do have some Q&A going on. Thank you.
Hi,
Oh, I think there's a question.
I have one.
Oh, okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
Hi.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So,
You all here in the back?
it's a,
Oh, thank you.
hi. My question builds off the question that I asked to you during lunch. And you had told me that the best way to sort of navigate going into graduate school, going into these sort of arenas that are being under attacked or that are being attacked, is to be strategic about how I do it and like how I go forth. And I wanted to ask, how do you navigate being strategic without losing your values or beliefs or even your science? As you know, you mentioned before, like they're not necessarily taking into account the data or anything like that. How do I maintain those things, but also ensuring that I'm in these spaces that I want to be in, that I deserve to be in? Thank you.
Great question. So I think it's important, first and foremost, understand how systems run. So get involved. If your goal is to have an influence in your department, get on departmental committees. Also find other people who have similar kinds of values and goals. So not only the values with regards to making a social difference, but also the goals to make sure that you all leave there with an education, a degree, and a career. And they will help when things are tight, having somebody else there with you. They can carry you sometimes. Sometimes you'll carry them, but you'll also focus on the fact that, again, as I had mentioned, the advice my father always gave us as kids was, again, first and foremost, make sure that you're successful at wherever you're at. You have a responsibility to do that, and you also have a responsibility to try to make that place a little bit better for those who come after you. You can't do one or the other. If you're successful but you don't help anybody, or if you're helping, you've made all this change but you don't finish, then that was a waste too. And so finding other people that are also supportive in that. But when I think about being strategic, you can't be strategic without knowing how the place that you're at actually works. And the best way to do that is to be involved, to ask questions, to participate in committees, even if they seem like, I don't want to say a waste of time, but other people are trying not to be on the committees. But that's how you learn how things actually work.
Hi, my name is Summer. I'm a junior psychology and African American studies double major here at LMU. And my question is kind of building off of Christian's of I wanted to know a little bit more about your experience of working so long within higher education, how you kind of had to legitimize your population of interest within a very white an institution of higher education and psychology, because I'm kind of going through similar struggles of applying to grad school and like wanting to focus on doing sports psychology, particularly with Black and brown athletes, but that is not a population that is legitimate within sports psychology. So I'm curious, how did you kind of navigate that with, working at or going to University of Michigan and then working there and having to legitimize Black and brown people and queer people, just any sort of diverse minority, as something that should be studied within a white institution or a white dominated field? Thank you.
That's a great question. Great question. So on the one hand, I would say I never felt like I needed to legitimize who I was studying and why I was studying, because I always thought that studying, in my case, Black folks, was in and of itself worthy and worthwhile and important. And that, again, psychology, if psychology is truly the study of human beings, then psychology has a lot to learn from the study of Black folks, because Black folks are human beings. Similarly, I also felt like because Black folks are human beings, it's important, if I want to study them in an authentic way, that I also partook in understanding what general psychology had to say as well, good, bad, and ugly. And so I've always felt like psychology, that the work that we do studying Black folks, while is important, I hope, to our understanding of Black folks, it also is important in understanding identity in general. And that if someone chooses not to see that, that's their loss. But I always wanted to be able to articulate why this is an important piece for psychology in general, and what the contribution is to psychology in general. So never feel like you have to, quote unquote, justify, but at the same point in time, understand that the people that you're studying, if we don't understand what's going on in their unique experiences, then we don't understand human behavior. So for those people who want to be a generalist and say, oh, well, you're only focused on this small group, as I just mentioned to you, chances are they're focusing on a group that's even smaller than the one that I'm actually trying. And so I've always, in every study that I've ever done, noted that the population that I was studying was Black. And not just Black, but African American. It made it very clear that African American is not all Black people and that there are differences with regards to those, and try to live up to what I had learned back as undergrad in my intro to psych class about not generalizing beyond my data. And so as long as I wasn't doing that, in my mind, I was doing good work. And I don't really want to hear, when you haven't done that, that criticism to me. Am I calling or I don't know who's.
Okay.
Why don't we go here, um, and then over there. So yes. Um, yes, I think it was a political strategy that was extremely effective. So one thing that we've known in psychology for over 100 years is if you activate an us against them paradigm, you can get people to do all kinds of things that are against their own personal best interests, and to accept things from you that they would otherwise denounce. And you have seen a master class from a particular group. I will not answer unless asked about who that group is, who have utilized that absolutely. And in every case that they can, the focus is it's them. It's them. I'll protect you against them. Those folks who will come here and break down your house and kill you. It's all happening out there. So you raise tension, you raise anxiety. On top of all of that, you blame everybody else out there. You say you guys are all right, but it's them who are after you. Psychology has long known that to be the case, but most politicians had not been willing to go but so far. You just have a space now where folks are willing to go much further than they ever were willing to go before. So I don't know. So I would say yes. And it's the authoritarianism isn't um, isn't unique, but it's only a part of the mechanism in which they've done it. So half the time, I don't know whether they believe what they're saying or not. And half the time, I'm not sure they believe. And in fact, most of the time, not all of them believe the same thing. But that's okay, as long as I get you to believe that we're all part of the same space and that I'm on your side and you're in threat, you can do a lot of different things. And we've done that in American politics for a very long time, but there's always been a line, a set of lines that folks weren't willing to cross. And that's my biggest fear, quite frankly, and I'm now becoming political, but my biggest fear is we're not going to go, how do we go back? After, how do we go back to a place where there was a line? So many different lines. Oh,
Hello, my name is Amir Edwards. I'm a sophomore psychology major and African American studies minor. As someone who's aspiring to be a professor of psychology in the future, you were saying earlier how Michigan is a place now where DEI is removed from all their websites. So how do you as a professor try and get your university to listen to you, especially when a topic of issue around the institution is something that's a focus of your study?
so that's a good question. So first, I feel like it's every bit as much my university as the administrator or my university. Can you all hear me? I'm trying, okay. So that's first and foremost. So I have to feel like I have a right to push back. So what I've done is I've made sure in the sphere that I have control over, so our Michigan program for advancing cultural transformation, I talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Diversity, equity, and inclusion's in on my website. They will have to come and get me to pull those, which I know they won't, because what happened is they basically told folks that this is what had to happen, but they had no plan to do anything about it if folks did. And there's some folks who, are pushing back with regard to that. I am talking to press, been talking to the local politics, party politics, to see about potential changes with regards to our governance structure and getting involved in ways that I hadn't before with respect to hiring new regents and making sure that is the case. Also meeting with other faculty who have similar kinds of goals. We had a rally where we had 10,000 folks last spring with a march with t-shirts, DI, U of M is DI, or U of M is DI, as a way of trying to get folks together, mainly trying to raise awareness in the places and spaces that I can.
My name is Robert Villanueva, and I'd like to make a comment, if it's okay. Thank you. Firstly, I'd like to thank you for your enlightening lecture. And I'm glad I came by. I was just driving by. Firstly, I'd like to say that I've always been committed to the philosophy of equity, diversity, and inclusion since 1969, when I became a civil rights activist, which helped open up the doors to higher education. If you go to the fourth floor of the University Hall, you'll see that picture of Mecha. I was there when the picture was taken. But unfortunately, due to nepotism and other things, and I'm just being straightforward, transparent, the history department chair and the person with the oral histories department project has not responded to me. Reason why I'm saying that, because I'm the poster child of gatekeeping and exclusionary measures against me. 146 IQ, summa cum laude, Columbia University Masters. a boy from the hood from Venice, if I may speak in a unorthodox discourse, from the hood in Venice before they gentrified it. Brown berets, martial outside the Black Student Union at UCLA, Santa Monica College. I only received 1 B+ in everything, and 5 degrees that I have, all straight A's. And I was 25% formal education, and they called us names and everything, put us in the back of the classroom. That's just a little of what they did to us in the 60s. So what didn't kill me made me stronger. It gave me a purpose to hopefully balance the contours of American democracy. And that's what I've done as a civil rights activist to today. I'm 7 decades later. So where I stand is that 1,342 applications. I've never I'm a former college professor, but only adjunct because the 80% of all full-time faculty members in post-secondary community colleges and universities are still white. And when it comes to DEI, it's imperative that it be incorporated into psychology departments. As an historian, we've already infiltrated that because I'm one of the avant-garde of the post civil rights movement scholars who rewrote a lot of histories using oral histories and everything else to change the historical discourse, to include, because of historical erasure, include Americans of color, to shed light on these stories. So right now, yes, the status quo is still alive and well. Famous Spanish historian George Santayana said, when a society fails to learn from its past, it's doomed to repeat it. I'm going to be 70, and I still cling to the belief that I will be hired for a job that's worthy to me. I cannot wash dishes, which I was destined to do when I was a teenager, because this is a system. It's built this way due to Puritan exceptionalism ideals. And I just wanted to shed light on that. But I still, I'm going to in the fray to do what I can. And I'm not going to give up. I'll never retire. And by the way, I was a member of America Mensa. I have a photographic. Reason why I'm sharing this, because this boy from the hood never got his chance, still to this day, because of the gatekeeping. And there's people with B's and C's that are white are getting these jobs because of nepotism and and race. And I hope during these journals in psychology, there's more race included, because this is a shame that the society is still the same. The structure. The master, if you don't want to use a word, the people, but for me, I'm still a man of honor, integrity, principle by word, and we work harder to get these A's and these degrees, to work double of what my father told me to work harder. You don't have to be a gardener like I am, because I lived in the servants' quarters here. So hopefully the chair of the history department will hear what I just said, and others, because I'm considered kind of like a threat because of what I had to do to open up the doors of the tear gas at the moratorium in the Chicano movement in 1970, or in East LA and other places, in the American sovereignty movement over in Hawaii, and the Black Power movement. I was there at Berkeley and all the places. And I already shed my tears and everything. But I still am patriotic, and I love this country because I'm not part of the hate group. I'm actually been in this country since time immemorial as an American Indian. We're not even in the stats. We're not even in the stats. And 1% of full-time faculty members are Black and brown, Latinx and Chicanx and African Americans. Less than 1% are African American. So it's okay. Nobody can take away my degrees from UCLA, Columbia, University of Hawaii, Sac State, Santa Monica College, and Santa Barbara College. I just wanted to shed light on this. And the ones that are Americans of color in this, don't give up. And by the way, we became neoliberal. And that's what happened. They took away affirmative action, now multicultural centers. And by the way, I'm creating a new theoretical framework called American Comparative Narrative Theory, apart from critical race theory. That's going to be copyrighted by the U.S. Library of Congress in about 2 years. I'm trying to get in the Ivy League right now to do some things, not because of the sake of, because it's Ivy League, because this is a comparative, intellectual, and a historical way of teaching American history, because they say that critical race theory is too white bashing. So I have a way, and I taught it at Coptic College. Who would ever think God would bring me to Coptic College to teach history to students from the inner city, which I know how to teach, not school. So enough said. Thank you for letting me expound on this.
No, thank you for your service. Thank you. Thank you. So thank you all, and thank you, sir, for coming. I appreciate and all your service. Thank you, please. And thank you all for coming, and thank you all for staying. It has been my great pleasure to be here today. So, thank you.